Hello and welcome everyone to our interview with an artist for our Celebration of Art with a Capital A show here at the Cayuga Museum of History and Art in Auburn, New York. I'm Kirsten Gosh, I'm the Executive Director here, and I'm pleased to introduce Victoria Fitzgerald, who is our artist, who will be speaking to us today about her show. Thanks.
I'm excited to be here.
So I guess just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about the show and your inspiration for this exhibit?
The inspiration for the show came when I was teaching an art camp next door to Schweinfurt. I had a group of children, both boys and girls, and we picked a different artist each day to work on for our week-long camp. And predominantly, they were all men in this particular week of art. And we had one, and it was Frida Kahlo. It's right over there on the wall. And at the end of the week, I asked all of the children who their favorite artist was. And the girls all said Frida, and the boys all said Van Gogh, because he chopped off his ear. And I asked the girls why, and they said because she was a woman. And so the only reason that they picked her really was because she was relatable. Yeah. And it made me think, why is that there really aren't too many women artists, and or at least why are there too many artists, women, that we are educated about and know as much as we know all of the male artists. And so that really was just the inspiration that served to bring this whole project to light.
How old were the students?
They were mixed in age, actually. So the camp was set up so that in the morning they were younger children, in the afternoon they were older children, and the inspiration actually came from the younger children. Yeah. And so they ranged from, I believe it was 6 to 10 years old.
Okay.
So the average age was probably about 8 in that group of kids.
And was this their first introduction to any sort of art history about any artist, or do you know were they taught anything in school?
I think it was mixed. Some of the children had a bit of an art background. A lot of these kids really love art. Obviously, they're at an art camp, so they were familiar with some artists. One of the particular children actually brought in a book about Van Gogh cutting his ear off. It was a kid's book.
Yeah.
So it was really cool because we got to talk about it and share a little bit more. But no, I don't think that they have a lot of educational experience about artists themselves.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm sure if they were taught about it, they were probably just taught the really famous male artists that we all know about, that are the ones that are in history books.
Right.
So I'm also thinking it's kind of interesting too that you were able to talk about some of the personal stories with the artists, and it wasn't just about the art. So I wonder, is that something too that you were able to bring in to the show at all when you started researching artists?
Yes, absolutely. I think that was a huge catalyst for the whole thing, really, because even I didn't go formally to art school. I don't have a fine arts degree. I'm just a self-taught artist, and I didn't know a lot about women in art and what their backgrounds were and what the story was behind it. And as I started to dig up more and more, I learned that a lot of these women were married to famous men, or weren't. They didn't gain the recognition until years later, after they passed away or whatever the case was. And so there were a lot of factors and stories behind each and every one of these artists that came to light, for me at least, and that I wanted to share with everybody else. And we did at the camp. Part of the whole experience was about not just making a cool piece of art, but teaching these children about the history. That was the whole point of the Mini Masters project. So I think that it really worked out well, on both regards.
Yeah.
Because I learned a lot, and hopefully, I can share that with everybody through this project.
So can you speak to your process? So once you got the idea that you wanted to bring some famous and also some not so well-known women artists to light, can you just talk about how you then went forward?
Sure. I truthfully, like anyone else, I just started Googling. I went to the World Wide Web and I honestly just typed in women artists, and it gives you right off the bat a string of different ones, both living and deceased, and I just started to pick through, and I really just started to dig, and then the more that I would dig, the more I would find, and the more that would lead to the next artist, and so it was almost like a scavenger hunt of information.
Yeah.
Which was actually a really fun part of the project, was picking each artist and picking what style there are, because as artists, many move through different phases of their lives, right? And so they change direction, they change what they're painting or the style that they're painting. I mean, Picasso was famous for it, right? All the different phases of his life, and a lot of them had different meaning. Not all of them do that, but a lot of them do. And so I, got to sort of go through and pick the different styles and all of it. So it was just a really great overview of a lot of different information about all these artists.
And speaking about the paintings themselves, so you can see some of these around here. So you did the portrait of the artist in your signature style, which
Yes.
you like to call your spooky lady style.
Yes.
With very pronounced eyes and their facial features and things. So can you talk about why you decided to use your signature style with this, and then how you came up with what's in the background?
So, they say all good art is imitation, right? But obviously, for me as an artist, you want to put your own spin on it. And so, going into this project, it was, how can I come up with this project and make it come to fruition, and it still be my work and be authentic, but get my message across. And so that was the best way that I could see doing it. I already painted women. That was my thing. I really enjoyed doing portraiture and sort of an expressionist portrait style, and conveying some type of emotion from those paintings, particularly with the eyes. So that was what I wanted to bring to this project. And so I decided to go through, and I basically went with two different styles throughout this project. So I either did, like you mentioned, the artist with their style of painting in the background, or I actually chose to just do a portrait of the artists themselves in my style.
Yeah.
One was to sort of showcase their different styles of art, and the other was really, either way, just to bring light to who they were and to give them some recognition regardless.
Yeah. No, I think it's really powerful, and I think it's a really unique way that you portray these women. I don't know if anybody else that has done this, and I think it was a really, really brilliant idea. Something else that when we started talking about this, when you were doing your research, you uncovered the huge disparities between representation of men and women in the art world, which, as you can see, we put statistics around the room. Can you speak to why you felt that was really important to include in the show?
Yes, because the more I dug into this project, and the more I learned, the more horrifying it was. The disparity between men and women in art is unbelievable to this day. And you think how far we as women have come. But this is an industry where we have not made a lot of headway. And there are some organizations that are trying to do this now and bring recognition to these women. But I think the statistic is something like 85% of our museums is still by men. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, that's a pretty big gap.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of room for growth, and my hope is that by projects like this, we can bring more recognition to women in art, and hopefully like these girls that were in the camp, maybe one day they'll have the ambition to become an artist and share their gift with others and receive the pay and recognition that they deserve for their work.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, we were actively doing an inventory of our own painting collection when we started talking about this. Yeah. And we found the same thing. We're not a major art museum, of course, but we still hold a collection of about 217 paintings. And we found that out of those, 149% by men. So, I think this is an issue in the art world for institutions being small, and then especially for galleries, and we do have a long way to go.
We do. For all of it, gallery representation, museums, art sales. Even
Art fairs.
Yeah, art fairs. The difference between men and women for what art sells for is staggering. The price difference.
Yeah.
And I mean, also one of the things I think you and I touched upon when we were researching, your archive work as well as, what we were bringing to this project, is that a lot of these women also signed as men.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, throughout art history, there are paintings that we will never know who actually painted them because women weren't allowed to sign art.
That's true. So I guess can you just speak a little bit more as to why you feel it is so important to recognize these artists, and what can museums and galleries do to more actively collect and exhibit their work?
I think it's important because I think, even in today's climate in our world, I think people are finally recognizing the fact that there is inequality and that everyone deserves to be seen and to be heard. And that goes for women in art. I mean, it goes for women, minority, all of these people, art is for everyone. Lots of people make art. Why not share it with everyone, by everyone? There's no reason to just have a select few people that get recognition for what they're doing.
Yeah.
Many people have gifts.
And I think it will be really helpful to create a more inclusive environment for everyone so that everyone who's coming to these galleries and museums can see a piece of themselves there.
Yeah.
And it's not just for one audience anymore.
Agreed.
So I know that we're talking about the topic is definitely relevant this year in particular with the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, also the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which you included in the show. Did the events of this year in particular make you think about this exhibit in a new way? Because you've been working on this exhibit for about 2 years, but definitely as you were finishing this year, did you think about it differently?
I think it solidified it. I don't know that I thought about it differently. I think that it, if anything, fueled the fire.
Yeah.
With all the events leading up to this exhibit, I felt that it was good timing, that the world is where it's at and that there was a place for this project, and I'm thrilled that I chose to do it at the time when I did. And it's really unfortunate that Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, and I did want to include that in the show. She was sort of the last minute addition because she really was an activist for women in general. And this project is, like I said, just about bringing to light some recognition. And she was, one of those founding women that has done so much. So, yeah.
Is there any particular piece that's your favorite, or any artist that really spoke to you more than others? I know you included so many in the show. There's so many more that you could have picked. Anyone in particular that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I think, you and I have discussed this before, but I feel like the project isn't really done. There is a lot more that I would like to do, and that I probably will continue on. The original list that we discussed had over 40 artists on it. So, we're barely touching the iceberg. And there's so many more amazing women in art out there, and I'd like to continue.
Yeah.
But in particular, there were a few that I came across that that really spoke to me or that I gravitated towards. And one of them I actually ended up listening to a podcast one night on the way to work, and it was an interview with Celia Paul, and she's actually in the other room, in the blue room, and her story just was pretty amazing, and how she's literally devoted her life to art, and she is just this amazing woman, and unfortunately was married to a famous artist man. I guess not really unfortunately, but I think stole some of her amazing thunder, and so she is a force to be reckoned with. She's living. She's in the UK. She recently wrote a book.
Oh.
So that's out there. And,
yeah.
I think she's just a pretty amazing woman. I think her style is very interesting. She sort of does this dark portraiture, which obviously speaks to me. So I really gravitated towards her work a lot. They're all amazing, all of these women in different ways.
No, they all are. I know.
Yeah, but her stuff was probably one of the ones that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that working on the piece too as well.
So since this was inspired by your students, what do you hope that this exhibit says to them if they haven't seen it?
And unfortunately, they probably haven't because of our, current situation in the world. But, and part of the project, really the hope was to bring this to the masses and hopefully get the community involved. And I think that the message is just the opportunity is there, and that you can do anything that you want, and that if you want to be an artist in this world, that it's out there. I think it just, we're going to have to push for it a little bit harder and keep bringing recognition.
Yeah.
So I hope it's the message of hope, I guess, is that, that they have the opportunities that maybe women before us did not.
Yeah.
And not just women, minority women, anyone really who wants to do something that they haven't been able to do or that hasn't had the opportunity provided to them.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a great place to end. I think, looking at the show as a message of hope, I think that's really beautiful. And that's definitely what I get when I experience it. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So
Well,
thank you.
No, thank you, of course. And we will be doing a virtual tour of the exhibit where we'll be highlighting all of the pieces, all of the artists, all of the label copy, and that will also be on our website in conjunction to this interview. So for visitors who aren't able to see it, you'll be able to experience the show in multiple forms, just like you're here. So again, thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
It was an awesome opportunity. So I hope everybody gets to see it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.